When you're trying to find the coefficient of variance, or even just a mean or standard deviation, Excel is a really useful tool to use. And first, what you want to do, for some reason in this problem, they're not letting you copy the data over. Some of them have a copy button. This one does not. So just bring the data over into here, and I'll cut back when I'm done bringing it. And bring it, it's easiest to do in a column. So bring it over in a column, and then I'll show you what you need to do next. Once you copy them all over, double check to make sure that they're the right numbers, that you typed everything in right, and in other places you will be able to just copy it in straight away. So then the next thing you do is to make sure you don't make mistakes and copy them all over properly is notice that there's 14 data items here, and then count how many you have here, because the most common mistake is actually missing one entirely. Next, to get the coefficient of variation, which it's asking for, we need to find both the mean and the standard deviation. So I'm going to zoom in on Excel now. I want to go ahead and put the mean right there. So we go over here and we find average, which is the same thing as mean. Add them all up, divide by how many there are. It automatically knew that I wanted to do that column. You see how it's highlighted? So I can just hit enter, and that gives me my average. Then the other thing that we need is standard deviation. So what I do sometimes is I put it below, sometimes I put it over here. I'm going to put it over here for right now. And in this case it said sample standard deviation, so let me show you how to find that. More functions, and just the one that says standard deviation is the sample standard deviation. I think it says somewhere that it's the sample. Here it says sample. So standard deviation, and then this one with the P is the population standard deviation. So in this case it's the sample standard deviation. So I say yes, that's what I want to do, and then it asks me where do I want to do it, and rather than typing in a bunch of stuff, and I can just highlight it and say this is where I want to find it, and say OK, and then it gives me right there the sample standard deviation. And the trick here that's a little bit weird is that when you stick, because the coefficient of variation, hold on, let me just go to paper. Hopefully when you read the Learn section, you took notes on this page that looks something like this. And for this problem, we are doing the sample coefficient of variation to see how significant that standard deviation is for this specific problem. In general, when you're calculating, you only need to go one decimal place past where the original data set was once you get all the stuff through Excel. So since all the data in this data set was whole numbers, we can just use, we can do 60.9 divided by 359.8 to get our CV here. Stick that in, times 100%, or move the decimal place over 2 places, and you get 16.9%. So our standard deviation is 16.9% of our average in this case. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the second set. I put in all of the values. I double check. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 data items. I got 11 data items. I double checked and looked at them. Now we're going to go ahead and calculate the mean and standard deviation. I moved over so you could see what I was doing. I want it to go right there, just like we did last time. Last time we had the mean here and standard deviation here, so I'm going to do the same thing again this time. So right there, I'm going to get the mean, which is always one of the ones right there. Enter, no problem. And then I'm going to put the standard deviation right here. Again, by going over here, we need more functions. I'm doing the standard deviation, which down below here it does say that that's the sample standard deviation, not the one with the P. So sample standard deviation, yes, that's what I want to do. I'm saying OK. And then I can highlight again these and say, yes, that's what I want to do. I get that lovely number right there. And then we're going to plug those in a calculator again, because this part's easier to do on a calculator. And in this case, since the data set had 2 decimal places after it, we're going to round to the 3rd decimal place. Let's move over to that. So we're going to look at 0.635, right, divided by 1.791. Let's do that. So we divide it, we get 0.3545, blah, blah, blah. We need to round it, or we need to multiply by 100%, which I just moved the decimal over, which most of you do too. And then we've got the 35.455, so it's really rounds up to 35.5%. So let's look at that back in Hawks. So really what's going on here is that this second data set has a greater standard deviation as far as in terms of how it's related to the mean of that data set. It has a smaller standard deviation overall. I guess I can pull back up Excel. So the second data set has a smaller standard deviation. Here would just be 63 cents, since that's money, versus whatever data set A was. But when you compare it to its mean, the percentage of the standard deviation in accordance to the mean is greater. So it's a more varied set. So I hope that helped you guys take some shortcuts in your calculations, because I find when there's that many numbers, it's just much nicer to do it in Excel. And I hope the rounding explanation helps you all. Thanks. Bye.